Greetings and good afternoon from the Smithsonian National Museum of African Art. I would like to welcome all of you to Son of the Soil, the Story of Mansa Musa screening with a Q&A with the producer and the director of the film. The Smithsonian National Museum of African Art, along with a grant from the Lilly Foundation, invites students, their families, and all who are interested in the history of West Africa, film, culture, and the power of art to this very special screening and talk featuring the director, the producer, and the writer of the film, Son of the Soil, the Story of Mansa Musa. This is also presented in conjunction with the exhibition Caravans of Gold, Fragments in Time, Art, Culture, and Exchange across medieval Saharan Africa. Son of the Soil, the Story of Mansa Musa documents Malian artist Abdou Ouologuem's immersion into historical legend of the 14th century emperor Mansa Musa. The screening, which is geared towards middle, high school students, as well as educators and historians, is a wonderful introduction to the story of Mansa Musa, the art of filmmaking, and how the power of film helps us to understand the past. I would like to introduce our writer and producer of today's film. Ladan Osman is the author of Exiles of Eden, winner of the Hurston Wright Legacy Award, and The Kitchen Dweller's Testimony, winner of the Sellerman Prize. She has received fellowships from Cave Canaan, the Lannan Foundation, and the Michener Center. Her work in film includes Sam Underground, Son of the Soil, and The Ascendants. She is a 2021 Whiting Award honoree and lives in New York City. Our director is Joe Penney. Joe Penney is a filmmaker, journalist, and photographer from New York City. He is the director of Son of Soil, as well as the co-director of the short film Sam Underground, and producer and cinematographer for The Ascendants, a 2020 film. His writing and photographs have been featured in the New York Times, Reuters, The Intercept, The Nation, Time, Le Monde, and other publications. He is the co-founder of Saharan.com, a news agency and production company supported by the Open Society Initiative for West Africa. My name is Pier Penic. I am head curator for programming K through 12 for the Smithsonian National Museum of African Art. My role at the museum as the curator of education provides leadership, guidance, and management oversight of the museum's education programs for K through 12 to create an innovative and balanced program that responds to the museum's missions and its mission statement and strategic goals. I, along with the director of the film, Joe Penney, and the writer-producer of the film, Ladan Osman, we will enjoy a screening of the film, Son of Soil, followed with a Q&A. But first, I'd like to introduce Joe Penney, for he is going to show a film slide. And he's going to show films that were basically the muse for the creation of our film today. So I will let Joe start his slideshow, and he can talk about the films before we watch the screening of the film.
Of course, I start unmuted. So I first want to say thank you so much to Pierre and to the Smithsonian Institute for having us and for showing us our film. It's a real honor to be here. Thank you very much as well to everyone who signed up. We are really grateful for sharing your time with us and for witnessing our art. So I just want to speak briefly just to introduce the genesis of this documentary film. It started in 2014 with a photo series between myself and Abdou Ouologuem, who's featured here. He's in the center of the frame here. So this was entitled The Return of Mansa Musa, and these pictures were made between 2014 and 2018. They follow the fictional return of 14th century Malian king Mansa Musa to the modern day capital Bamako. Mansa Musa and his wife Inari Conte have completed the fifth pillar of Islam by making a legendary pilgrimage across the Sahara Desert. Along the way, he built dozens of mosques and spent so much gold in Cairo, the price of the metal dropped for the next 20 years. So as you see in the next picture, Mansa Musa has just arrived in Medina Kora, a neighborhood in central Bamako, along the railway which connects Bamako to Senegal. He finds a Mali radically changed from when he left. A few dozen admirers and well-wishers greet him on his arrival, but most in Bamako remain indifferent. Next picture, please. Considered by many to have wasted the gold of his country by giving it away to foreigners while leaving Malians to deteriorate, a lot of his subjects no longer consider him their true leader and simply ignore him. These photographs, as we see in the next picture, chronicle his gold-infused attempt at redemption at several landmarks in the city. So this railway is really in the heart of Bamako. And so these were staged interventions, public interventions. Next photo, please. In this photo, Mansa Musa visits the third bridge. The third bridge is the most recently built bridge in Bamako in an area that's seen rapid urbanization and population growth over the past decade. Next photo, please. So in all these pictures, me and Abdou, we decided on different places that were important to him and to the story and to us. And he would dress up as Mansa Musa and visit those places. So he's the only one that, by and large, knew that we were doing this photo shoot in this place and time. Next photo, please. So here we see Mansa Musa visiting a market that sells secondhand goods. Next photo, please. Beneath the third bridge is a mosque built entirely with stone by a Dogon architect. It's a sacred area used for prayer, and when the first rains of the year begin in June, the Joliba River floods the mosque until the rains end in November. So there's a portion of the year where this area is flooded and people can't visit it. Next photo, please. Mansa Musa's pilgrimage to Mecca is, of course, a spiritual one. Here we see him praying in a family house in Medina Kora. Next photo, please. And here in a mosque in Medina Kora. So these are all staged interventions. Next photo, please. Here again in the house in Medina Kora. Next photo. And here is a recreation of Mansa Musa's palace. The ideograms on the sides, that is a script that is indigenous to Mali. Next photo, please. So Mansa Musa wants to share his experience along the journey with the youth. So he visits the Lycée des Jeunes Filles Aminata Ba Diallo. The students dip their hands into a bowl of liquid gold. Next photo, please. And last photo, please. The Lycée des Jeunes Filles is one of Bamako's oldest French language secondary schools, and it's known for its prestigious alumni. So from this photo series, that's the end of the photo series, that kind of whet our appetite, and Ladan joined the project, and then we began the journey on this documentary film, which you will see now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Joe, for that wonderful introduction prior to seeing the screening of the film. Now, we are ready to show the screening of Son of Soil, the story of Mansa Musa. The film will run approximately 26 minutes in its entirety. Following the film, we will have a Q&A with the director and the writer and producer. You will also have the opportunity to ask questions that you can share in the comments. Now, we welcome you to see the viewing of Son of the Soil, the story of Mansa Musa. Thank you so much. That film was amazing. Now is the time for our Q&A with our director, Joe Penney, and the writer and producer of the film, Ladan Osman. I'd like to give our first question about the film to our producer and writer, Ladan. So, Ladan, what was your muse for creating this film?
Thank you so much, by the way, Pierre, for hosting, and thanks for the community for being here. So much of it was inspired by the work that Joe and Abdou had already done. When I saw the photographs, it seemed like they were, already moving. There was something in the quality of those and in the aspect of public performance, of performance art, just, after that, there are so many conversations about royalty and wealth and who's worth noticing, and when does the history start, and when does it become relevant, and how can we insert ourselves into history, and why is it that Black people are so absent from more complicated stories. And so, I just wanted to explore all that. And as we were starting to run into different dead ends, researching Mansa Musa, that of course was endlessly inspiring to me as an extremely curious person. I just wanted to know, well, why is this story missing? What are these lapses about? What are they attempting to accomplish? Because as a storyteller, I know very well that the omissions and the things that you turn away from, and that kind of just dishonesty in narration, there's usually information under there. There's usually a very worthwhile truth under there, and something that is probably worth celebrating. And so I think that was a lot of what framed the early conversations we had about this project.
Great, that's wonderful. So why now? I mean, why was it important to make a film about the life of Mansa Musa presently in the 21st century?
Well, I think for a lot of different reasons. One of them being that there's a lot more power in media now, and as Black people diasporically, we are taking that and running with it. And so as we do that, and we think about not only the past and the present, but also the future, we do end up turning back and thinking about, well, what are the stories that are absent in history? And what are the ways that if we can speculate a bit about history and think a little bit more actively about these stories, that we can kind of see, well, thing, it's not such a closed story. And then beyond that, I mean, in this COVID time, kind of post first wave, millionaires and billionaires have increased their wealth to a ridiculous degree. There are so many conversations about money. There's active conversation about if it's right for Jay-Z and Beyonce to wear like a Tiffany's diamond, with Jean-Michel Basquiat's work in the background. And he was so interested in the idea of a crown and of crowning the self and what is the radiant self. And so much of that does connect with me to, the early African kingdoms and the first stories that we may have had about ourselves that would have been documented. And Mansa Musa is such an important part of that history of the writing and the storytelling and the narration that's still here. That's not to say that there weren't other traditions that have lasted too, but what more can we say about that imprint? How can we think about this story in a more interesting way than, like a rich guy went around and he had a lot of gold? Actually, he was the custodian of the land's wealth and of the people's wealth. And to whatever degree that he used that or misused that, it still relates to issues that we're considering today for everybody of all ages. But I think probably especially the youth that are watching the world change and in some ways even collapse around them. It's more immediate, I think, for young people.
That's excellent. I want to actually someone had asked a question. I thought it was very interesting. So I'm actually going to show the question. And it was, what were some of the challenges that you faced bringing this film to life? And what can we learn from Mansa Musa's history? And that can go to both of you, both Joe, and you can answer this question, either one.
Oh, sure. Thank you so much for the question.
Yeah.
There were a lot of challenges in bringing this story to life. I mean, from purely logistical ones to financial ones to storytelling in terms of bringing lots of different elements together in a short film. There were a lot of people who told us that this wasn't a story worth telling, which seems crazy to us, but you know, that did happen. But again, as Ladan said, that kind of made us more determined to tell the story, because it felt like, yeah, if the story is really buried, it must be, you know, for a reason, and it must be an important thing to do to really see this through. So yeah, the challenges, you know, logistical challenges, getting the film funded was a challenge. Getting reaching an audience was a challenge. We are not filmmakers. Our background, neither of us are filmmakers. I'm coming from a journalism background. Ladan is coming from a poetry and writing background. So we are also learned how to make a film while doing this film. So that was a challenge. And as far as what can we learn from Mansa Musa's history, I mean, there's so much to learn. For us, at least I can speak for myself, Mansa Musa is an important historical figure, but he's also a hook, a name that brings us into questions of global power and how the world was prior to colonialism in West Africa. So for me, it's really important to learn about the history of Mali, and what we tried to do in this film was really point to where this story has been erased and where it's been buried, why that might be the case, and what's really important about just bringing it to life. And we did that through art. But for you know, one of the most important things for me, you know, was one of the things that Dr. Catherine Kogory-Vidrovich said was that even in the French crowns, in European crowns, Mali really provided a lot of the gold for the world, which then became the currency. So economic growth in Europe and in what's now known as Middle East or West Asia, that really was coming from Mali prior to even Europeans arriving in Mali, ever setting foot there. The Renaissance that was built off of you know, gold. You know, when Florentine bankers backed artists in the Renaissance, they used gold. That gold was Malian gold. So this is a type of history. West Africa has a really central position in world history, and we wanted to really point to that and try to bring attention to that.
Excellent. That's excellent. So, Joe, what was most inspiring to you about this project, in addition to what you had just said? What was most inspiring to you?
Yeah, so I would say, you know, coming from a journalism background where I'm largely working alone, I think working in a creative context and working with Ladan and Abdou, that was something that was really inspirational. You know, these are two really exceptional artists who are creative visionaries, and it was just a real honor to be collaborating with them. And I think like our specific skill sets made a nice balance in this way. And so that kind of something creating larger than the sum of its parts, that was something that's really inspirational. Another thing is just, yeah, purely from just finishing this film and making it and being able to watch it here with everybody today, that is inspirational for me, because it was, yeah, it was, you know, it was something, it's a monumental story. So we're just chipping, you know, away at and trying to make something to contribute to that and to bring the conversation a bit more to the fore.
Well, I love the way the film came together, because you're bringing in the artists, and I love the artistic images and how everything was kind of juxtaposed with the history and the present. I think it's very, very important. And I'll definitely ask you more about this whole idea of bringing the past with the present and making the past more relevant as we see those connections. So your experience working on the film specifically as the director, and a journalist with your journalist background, what was your experience working as a director from a journalistic perspective on this film with the film crew?
Yeah, I mean, it's, like I said earlier, if you're a journalist, you're really working either by yourself or maybe with one or two other people. So when you're working with a whole film crew, it's, it's a totally different experience. Although a lot of the stuff we did do is just, Ladan and I, a couple other people, other producers. But yeah, just being, just creative collaboration on a larger scale. It's just, it provokes more. You have to maybe give more of yourself in a way. But as a journalist as well, there's very few primary source information about Mansa Musa and about this time frame. This is somebody who is one of the most important figures in the history of the world, and there's almost no primary sources. So that's, I mean, it's confounding. It's also a historical crime. And so,
Yes.
So when I look at it from a journalist perspective, it's like, I need to, it's so engrossing, the story. I just need to get to the heart of it, because I need to understand it even for myself. And so I think that journalism instinct helped me in this case, just trying to get to the heart of the story.
Excellent. We have a question, and I'm just going to kind of include questions from viewers and my own together. But how is your relationship to writing? And this would go to Ladan. How has your relationship to writing transformed in the process of writing for this documentary? What does it mean for you to write for a piece that has so many dynamic parts, people?
Thank you for that question. I mean, like Joe said, it was complicated. We were Googling, like, what does a director do? What does a writer do? And Google actually has a lot of information. And so that, so much of it was just bringing back, and I think so much of that is like poetry, is like other work that I do, is really trusting that there is some connection between the materials, and that there's a place for you to explore and to investigate. And so that kind of foundational trust that was established in other practices definitely helped with this. And so in thinking about this, I mean, it was, and Joe can be is a very involved director, but in other ways is hands-off and very trusting. And so when it came time to try and stitch together some of these scenes or interviews, or think about like what some of the B-roll or some of the poetic moments could look like, I had a lot of time to just think about how to help Joe and Abdou create not only a portrait of Abdou, but of Abdou inside of his city, inside of Bamako, inside of the surrounding areas, and to get a sense of time in that way, and the way that history has marked the place. And so to think about light, shadow, reflection, dust, wind, shimmer, all of that was so good for my process overall, and has absolutely completely transformed me as a writer. It has helped my ambitions in directing. Piece that has all those dynamic parts and people. It was just an opportunity to learn and to be humble, and to think about how to, it's almost like having a relationship to light, is how can I help this light be as flattering as possible, or as illuminating as possible, where it is that the director Joe, and where it is that the star Abdou, and where it is that the story itself, what it wants and where it wants to go. And so really difficult, but also super exciting. Yeah.
Excellent. And the next question actually is for both of you. So how has the film experience changed you as an artist, as a writer, as a journalist, and your perception of Africa?
Joe, do you want to?
Joe, we can be.
Okay, yeah. So,
okay.
Yeah, so I would say that it's changed. I mean, this process has really changed me quite a lot. I feel like I've learned so much on a professional level and a personal level. You know, it's a really ambitious story. We really tried to do, you know, fit as many different pieces as possible. But, you know, obviously there's still pieces that are missing. And so the process of, you know, just trying to create a cohesive narrative out of that is something that I learned a lot about storytelling, because I think, you know, journalism, I'm not cynical about journalism. I believe in journalism and its power, but I also believe that it does have its limits, and its limits is it's hard to really imagine and create new worlds with journalism. And then that's where creativity can really like shine through. And so yeah, just learning how to be a responsible storyteller, trying to do justice to the magnitude of this story and to its historical significance, and to highlight the historical crimes and the crime of narrative that has been, you know, central to, unfortunately, to our education system. And so yeah, I mean, I don't know how much it changed my perception of the continent as a whole, but, you know, learning more about this pre-colonial history and how it's been so buried and why it's been so buried, and Europe's role in that. It's also a responsibility to be able to tell that, and to try to mend that, and to bring these stories to the fore.
Excellent. Joe, Ladan, did you want to comment on that question?
I think the only thing that I would say is that it changed I think it really enhanced my relationship to dreaming, to not only think about invented things as a place to dream and possibility, but that things that have already happened, that there's so much that exists in time, in memory, in conversation, in the landscape. And all of that is continuously kind of changing and whispering and suggesting things to you. And if you trust in that, and you respect, you know, what it is that the story and the history wants to reveal, there are a lot of ways that can inform your research and your openness. Because I think a lot of what we found is that in a lot of fields, in history and anthropology, and that's no disrespect to the Smithsonian or any other institution, but there can be, if you're already coming with a certain bias and you're already coming with a certain kind of limitation, it's actually you that's smaller than the story, and it's you that's smaller than the history. Just information can flow in, and then as it passes through you as a kind of sieve, the more that you can share with people, the more that you invite other people's questions and other people's dreaming, so that we have a much richer tapestry of the world as it exists around us, and what's possible for the world as well. And so that's one thing that I appreciated so much, is that I was aware of that as a concept, but it was an opportunity to just really like act it out. And I really want to give credit to a kind of associate producer, Shane Boris, and to Mahan Bonetti at the New York African Film Festival, who were some of the earliest people who really believed in what it is that we were doing and how we were using images instead of trying to do a more straightforward documentary. They understood that it was really important to have a kind of double exposure of Abdou as an artist in a place and time as a way of accessing history and as a way of speaking to the wider diaspora, who we have, so many of us have felt excluded from stories and feel like our personal histories are fragmented, let alone what happened centuries ago. And so
Sure. We have another question from one of our viewers. And this will go to either one of you, which one of you would like to pick that up. But can you speak to the number of sources and materials that sought to diminish the importance of Mansa Musa versus those that might have embellished his accomplishments?
So I can just speak briefly to this, which is that there's just a handful of sources that speak about Mansa Musa directly. And so everything else that's added on, it really just builds on, maybe it's like 5 to 7 sources in all. It's Ibn Battuta, Ibn Khaldun, Al-Umari, the Tariq al-Fatash, and the Tariq al-Sudan, and just a handful of others. And so the Tariq al-Fatash and Tariq al-Sudan, they're from Mali, but they're written 200 years later. Those other 3 sources are not from Mali. One is an Egyptian scholar, and the other 2 are North African. So that's what I mean when I said that those are important sources, but you want to hear from Malians, and so that was a real challenge, is trying to build a narrative when you don't have the real primary source material. And so those outside sources, they bring their bias with them, and so that's something that we tried to really be sure that, when Ibn Battuta is speaking about the Empire of Mali, what are his biases that he's bringing to that? And so as Dr. Abdel Kader Haidara said, the real answer for us is probably in the manuscripts, which are really, there's so many manuscripts and they're not translated, unfortunately. And so for us, I mean, it's so important to really bring that information to life. One other thing is that, in addition to all that, the oral history, as was mentioned towards the end of the film, oral historians, so griots, they don't speak about Mansa Musa either. So he's been erased from the oral tradition as well. And that is most likely because, he brought, basically, as Dr. Ismail Dadje Haidara was speaking about at the end, he really shifted the paradigm and basically brought in a new guard of how to govern that was, more closely aligned with Islam, but also his personal vision of things. And that sort of sidelined the oral tradition and the griots. So when you go to Mali, there's songs and songs about Sunjata Keita, who's the founder of the Mali Empire. They abound today, but there's none about Mansa Musa. So that's why, because the griots don't speak about him.
Thank you, Joe. And one of the things I just want to comment on is that I feel that your film creates this safe space for conversation about the past and sort of bringing the past into the present and making the past as relevant today as it was yesterday. So there's a certain juxtaposition or an amalgamation that's taking place in this film from beginning to end as I'm watching it and absorbing it, and then including the French dialect with it. So in your opinion, and I like to ask both of you this, why is the story of Mansa Musa so relevant today? And why should young people know about Mansa Musa? Okay. Well, Joe, you can start.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I mean, just in general, in order to know yourself, you need to know where you're coming from, and it's helpful, at least. And so just to understand how the world got to be where it is now, it's important to know all the different events and things that happened to get us to this place. You know, so Mansa Musa is a really important part of that. And the Mali Empire is a really important part of global history. And so when you leave that out, when its central role is not treated as central, you're doing a disservice to history, but you're also doing a disservice to everybody, because then our understandings of ourselves are limited in that way. And so I think that's a central part of it. As Ladan said, there's lots of different other things. We're not, this is not meant to be a definitive history by any means of Mansa Musa, and it's not really a character study either. We're not, fans necessarily of absolute monarchs, but there's still lessons to be learned in that, and there's still, there's so much in the history that we need to know. So yeah.
Thank you, Joe. Ladan, did you have a comment to make about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think all I would add to that is that, I mean, it's very important to me as a Black creative that young people especially get to have a more complicated notion of, or can even start to dismiss a notion or redefine a notion of Black excellence. That doesn't have to be so tied to ideas of domination, of ruling, of hoarding resources, and so I think the most important parts of Mansa Musa's history is he wasn't just kind of like trying to, bling out across the desert to show off. I mean, maybe that was a part of it, but part of it was also, projecting power that was actually in hand, that actually existed. Part of it was also attempting to build powerful alliances. Part of it was also seemed to be, from our best guesses and from consulting with historians, a kind of like preemptive way of protecting this massive empire because of the interest that was coming from outsiders and the likeliness that those resources would be exploited. If you know what I mean, this empire was not able to protect itself from all sides and have a kind of like a more complex relationship, not only not only as a politician but as a dreamer is interesting. However, how does that tie into different like really terrible things that have to do with force, that have to do with slavery, that have to do with just like a deep sorrow in the land and of the people that had to be the subjects in order to execute this dream? We all have to ask our questions about who are our heroes, and if we are dreaming of being heroes ourselves, well, what responsibility do we have to each other, and how can we apply that dream in a way that is safe for everybody? Is it even possible? And every day that we look around the world is a great opportunity to think about what conscientious leadership looks like and what productive dreaming looks like. And so I think in this, because of what it is that I very strongly believe that he was trying to do and trying to assert, and I don't know necessarily that he failed in it, but this kind of like wave of European interest and brutal exploitation that would follow not too long after his reign, there's a lot of information basically in the century or two in what was going on in various African empires before that happened. It's an excellent opportunity to start to speculate and dream anew about stories that we think we understand, that are not so passive,
Sure, those
Yeah.
uncomfortable conversations
Yeah.
that often come up in classrooms,
Yeah,
whether it's
absolutely.
high school or college.
Yeah.
You mentioned Mansa Musa as sort of a hero, and I'd like you to sort of expand upon, in your opinion, what makes Mansa Musa a hero.
For me,
And this can go to Joe or Levin. Either one can answer it.
okay. I mean, I'd love to hear Joe's answer, but I just, I want to be clear that I don't know that I personally see him as a hero. I think it's hard for me to define hero, but I do believe he had a heroic yearning and a kind of a vision that was heroic because it didn't appear to be just based on his own interests. It did appear to be thinking about alliances and ultimately thinking about protection and a new idea of expansion for the empire. And for me, and maybe that's just my very strong bias, that was all very protective, and that I believe that he had a lot of foresight into what would be coming to the continent not too long after. And so resistance to me is always heroic. The way that he applied it and went about it, I don't know. I don't know that I could sit in a room and have a conversation with Mansa Musa, for example. I don't know that he would respect someone like me. I don't know what my positioning, had I been born anywhere in that empire, what I would have been expected to do. And, just thinking about kind of class status and hierarchy and all that kind of stuff. And so it's hard to tell, but it'd
No,
be
that
amazing to be able to have that conversation and to, to be able to, think about, well, what were you up to? What were you trying to do? And how do you feel about how people see you now?
right, right. According to him, excellent.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe, did you want to comment as well?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think for me, it's difficult to view history through the lens of heroes and not heroes. I mean, there are some people that are better than others for sure, but that's not the framework for me for understanding this person. But I just, yeah, as Ladan was saying, like at this time, North Africa was the primary trading partner with the Empire of Mali. And so as Al Andalus was losing power, there was a need for greater, and the white Europeans were descending downwards.
Mm-hmm.
There was a need for bigger trading partners. There's a need for other trading partners. So there's a need to connect with the rest of the world. So by making this pilgrimage, as Ladan was saying, it's an ambitious thing, and his predecessor, Abubakar too, made a similar journey westward in the Atlantic Ocean. There's scholarship about whether the Malians reached what's now known as the Americas back when they went. But the ambition of these people is that I do think is world shaping, and that's extremely notable. And it merits a really deeper conversation and deeper question and deeper research. And so for me, it's like there's probably manuscripts that speak to this, and there's probably, that's why I keep bringing it back to these manuscripts, because it's really tens of thousands of primary source documents. If it was about like the history of medieval Germany or France or something like that, there'd be entire university wings dedicated to it. But for now, it's just a couple of NGOs that's doing it by hand. We saw in the picture, it's Abdul Qadir Haidar's team and a couple other people that's just digitizing them. So it's the real heroes is the ones who are going to make this story known to everybody, and the people who are doing the work on the ground. So.
the educators.
Right.
That's definitely it. Librarians, educators, sure. But in your opinion, like, what is Mansa Musa's true legacy? How will he always be remembered? And before you answer that, I have to honestly say that it must have been about 15, maybe 17 years ago. I did a program at a public library in Virginia on the story of Mansa Musa, where I read a book and then I did an art project following the story time. And I remember the branch manager coming to me and saying, "Do you realize 125 third graders have signed up for your program?" And I was only expecting at the most 12 students to work with, and of course I had to change everything. And I was thinking, wow. And I remember the librarian saying that one of the teachers wants to talk to you before they bring the students. And I remember the teacher wanted to know how she can prepare third graders to truly understand the story of Mansa Musa, his power, being the richest man in the history of the world, and why I felt it was important for third graders to know his story. And for me, I was not aware how, if Mansa Musa was taught regularly in the public school system, or if it was even introduced in third grade curriculum. But what I do know is I felt it was important for third graders to learn African history. And I thought Mansa Musa was a perfect start because third graders do enjoy seeing power and embellishment, and just from the connections to how they're targeted in the movie, Disney movies, stuff like that. So I felt that was African history was important for the third grader, but it was even at that time, about 17, 18 years ago, I'm thinking there was an interest in Mansa Musa from the third grade teachers at this school. And, you could tell that the teachers wanted to know more, and they wanted to carry this story way after I provided the story time. They wanted to start a class discussion with the third graders about power and African history. So I ask you, in your opinion, what is Mansa Musa's true legacy, and how do you feel he will always be remembered? Joe, you can go first.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for that question, because that's really getting to the heart of what we're looking at as well. But yeah, and that legacy is seriously contested, and that's from the beginning of the first slide. We say that this legacy is shrouded in mystery and it's contested. In Mali, a lot of the opinion that we found is that this is somebody who spent a lot of money and spent it on people that are not Malian. I think that there's some thing to say for that, but then there's also that's can be kind of a misconception as well, because Mali was a seriously rich place that had so much gold. It wasn't like the gold just ended when he came back. There is still gold mining in Mali today in the same regions that mined gold 700 years ago. There's still gold there. So whether or not he depleted the resources, that doesn't seem historically accurate. When he went to Egypt, they said that he spent so much money. The sources vary, but it's up to 60,000 people traveling with him. They're going to have to spend money, to take care of people. And then what other primary sources in Egypt say is that the Egyptians overcharged them for absolutely everything and took advantage of them. So that narrative, some of it doesn't add up necessarily, in my opinion. He was also an empire builder, though. He conquered territory. He enslaved people. This is something that you can't just look past. So he was ambitious politically. He wanted to protect this region. He wanted to. He had. He really radically. He brought Islam to. I mean, it was present in Mali prior to him, but he had a major factor in bringing Islam in a more serious way into the governing structure and into the country as a whole. When one of the first European depictions of an African person is in the Catalan Atlas, and you see him holding an orb of gold. So he had a big impression on the rest of the world and Europeans as well. When the first Europeans came to West Africa, when they started going down the coast, they were looking for gold. That was what they were looking for. So it's a lot of different things, the legacy. So that's my personal view of it.
Thank you. And Levin?
Yeah, definitely. Like Joe said, I mean, I think that that's probably true of any legacy, that there's a place for more to enter. And for Mansa Musa specifically, there's a lot going on there with a kind of widespread political and material envy of what his empire had and what he was meant to be the custodian of. There was a very violent curiosity, and we see the ongoing impacts that has had all over the region. There is the opportunity in this legacy to think about diaspora, because in that bloodline, as Joe mentioned, they expanded both westward and eastward. And so the impact that has on the Black imagination cannot be discounted. And that's not that, Mansa Musa was only singular in that. It's not like he, was the only one that took that journey and had some of those ambitions, but he did have, to this day, an almost otherworldly assignment over tremendous wealth, over land that continues to be tremendously wealthy, but also tremendously exploited. And so there's also a conversation that we can think about and have about even like culture vultures. What does it mean for Europe? Like just possibilities of what a ruler can do, and what does a ruler have if they're faced with this, relatively young Black king who has so much and still captures the imaginations of people, still, more than likely impacted, this idea of Wakanda and the Black Panther. There's a lot that we can think about in terms of, well, that even exploitation is very crude and is not very hard to understand, but the spirituality or the lack of spirituality behind what causes someone to want to dominate someone else, or want to erase their story, or to change the trajectory of their entire empire or nation, that's something that continues to be ongoing. It's in the news at least once a week. And so I think that his legacy is actually a site of dreaming and a site of questioning. It's unfortunate that his specific person is erased, but at the same time, I think we're always going to be, I hope, at least as interested in the people who are the people who are mining the gold, who are the craftspeople that brought the empire into infamy, who are the transporters, who are the navigators, who are the recorders, the caretakers, the storytellers, who are the servants. All those people continue to be incredibly interesting to me. And I think that because this story is so vast, I would hope that part of the legacy is that the people that kind of upheld the legend of that empire at that time, and of Mansa Musa, that maybe that can inspire people now, and that will, lead to different kinds of histories and stories, but maybe even like depictions of what's nice or what's fancy can look different. Maybe there can be different ideas of wealth and luxury.
Sure.
just like a site of dreaming and of possibility, and that he's certainly a bridge between, in many ways, the East and the West, and of the past and the future, simply because, as Joe mentioned, his ambition was, I think, possibly even too big. I really believe that he was, at least 100 years too early in some of the things that he was trying to accomplish.
Sure. No, that makes complete sense. And, I have to put this on the screen because one of our attendees, our viewers, said, note that the Mali Empire is with the Virginia Public School curriculum, which is wonderful, which is excellent. And of course, that explains why I had so many students that specific day come to my program, which was very, very exciting. And this whole idea of the story of Mansa Musa influencing and changing how we see each other, which I think you all have answered that in your answers, in your narratives, because it can change how we see each other today. Or do you feel it can change how we see each other today, based on what Mansa Musa represents? Do you think that his story and his legacy has a certain innate power to change how we see one another today, not just in our communities, but in the world? Either one of you can answer that.
Yeah, sure. I definitely, I mean, for me at least, it definitely has that power. Narrative is so key, whoever builds the narrative, but I can't remember the quote that I was thinking of, but a narrative is key to building all sorts of relations. There's so many, there's so much of the African narrative, and West Africa is what we're looking at specifically, that's really been distorted, that's been erased, that's been discounted and devalued, and that has a serious impact around us. It has a profound impact. So there's a lot of information that's missing. The former French president even went to a point of saying that Africa has no history. It's a very racist comment made by Nicolas Sarkozy. But that's the mentality that exists out there amongst a lot of white people, unfortunately. And so that's very ignorant, and that needs to change, because that has an impact not only on the people that it's being talked about, but also the people who is even saying that, because you're kind of devaluing yourself if you're saying another person has no history. And that's what Dr. Sharp was speaking to in the film as well. So
Sure.
So everybody stands to grow from learning this history, and just learning a more accurate telling of history. Everybody stands to learn to grow from that.
Yes, and we definitely need to hear that. Lovin, did you want to follow up with what Joe said? It's just so deep and amazing.
Yeah, I totally support a lot of what it is that he's saying, and it was good to be able to have these conversations and for them to show up in the film, because so much about film is also people can that are clear in that sense, and that people feel welcome to ask these questions is really encouraging. I would just say, I think one opportunity that we have just in this conversation about dreaming as well, and about the power of narrative, is to think about, well, why would someone want to strip power from a narrative that I am a part of, especially if that narrative is reaching back hundreds of years is extraordinarily suspicious. And I think that, you know, too much power has been granted to aggressors and oppressors, and we are in a moment where we can really stand to ask, what is a person trying to gain when they fracture someone's history, someone's connectedness to their own land and to their heritage? And if something is of no value or is in some way no count, why are there such tremendous resources? Why is there such tremendous energy and a kind of obsession with erasing various African histories? I think absolutely that's something to be questioned, to be attacked, to be very solidly resisted, because part of our sovereignty and part of our freedom is participating in our stories and of recognizing that we don't have to prove anything to anybody. We already are. We already have done, and we will continue to do. And so that's also so much a part of the intention that's embedded in Son of the Soil, is like, and just even in the kind of symbolism of everything that the land holds. It's not just gold, it's knowledge, it's light, it's revelation, and it doesn't belong to any one person. It's not the dominion of like emperor, you know.
If I could just build on that and just add specifically based on
Yes.
the point that's being made here as well. This you know, a lot of the narrative that exists out there is that Africa needs Europe or needs the West, when it's really couldn't really be further from the truth historically. The West has needed Africa and has abused that for centuries. So yeah, this is trying to just sort of reframe that and trying to, because that narrative, if it's poisonous narrative, and it's poisonous to the people that it's about, it's poisonous to people who tell it. And so it's really just trying to get this poisonous narrative out of our system, and to build a better narrative. And that's so of course this is really central to what we're trying to do.
You know, I love how both of you are bringing up this, the idea of erasing history. And I think it's important for students. It's important for students to be able to have this conversation in classrooms, especially high school students. It's very, very important for them to be able to talk about this idea of erasing history, because our students see, I mean, they know what you're talking about, but how many of them feel that comfort level to be able to bring up the topic and to start the conversations? And so I'm grateful that you have done that. One of the things I love about museums and films is that, again, it does create that safe space for conversations. And I think that, you know, the whole concept of and the idea of an attempt to erase history is something that your film definitely brings out and allows us to be able to carry that narrative and that conversation going. The conversation definitely does not stop here, you know. But I wanted to comment on one of our attendees who said one of my students did their project on Mansa Musa, and it had such a powerful influence on him. Even with the little that we know, the story changes a whole narrative and is empowering. So again, we need the story to be more broad and to not appear like there's a marginalization going on with the story, but we want to make sure that more people do the research, go out and read more about it, study the art. And so I think that's very important as well. So, you know, and this whole idea of gold, we've talked about gold. We have a comment from someone that says it's important to understand that Europeans didn't initially come to Africa looking for slaves. They came looking for gold. And, you know, that is sort of an indirect connection, I think, to this whole aspect of conversation, starting out of Mansa Musa and this conversation about erasing history. So, so that was excellent. You know, I just wanted to direct a couple more questions to you. You know, basically personal ones, like, and this would be of interest to our younger audience listening. But what type of other projects are you interested in doing in the future? And both of you, Ladan, you can go first if you want.
Well, we're continuing to work as a team with different projects having to do with Masumusa, and I'll just and then one project that I'm working on is actually for young adult readers, and will feature it's a graphic novel project that will feature a young girl African hero. And so I can imagine that there are people in this community who may be curious about that. And so, you know, hopefully there'll be some news about that in coming months, inshallah.
Oh, that sounds really exciting. Okay. And Joe?
Yeah, so yeah, as Ladan said, we're interested in really developing this story further and really pushing the story and trying to touch on the different aspects that maybe were kind of left out of this short film, because it's, you know, it's a limited short film. So that's one project. I also co-founded a news website called Sahelian.com. So we do journalism, and please feel free to visit that website. You know, you can watch some of our other work. Ladan and I did other projects. She directed a documentary series that's really beautiful and fantastic called The Ascendants. And we have another short that's on YouTube called Sam Underground. So you can look at those. And so I'm interested in stories that evoke emotion and love, but they also have, you know, political goals, and they're kind of rooted in the material world as well. So.
Okay, excellent. And just kind of, you know, listening to what you said about stories about emotion and love with maybe sort of a political realm circulating that. Are you interested in, both of you, are you interested in creating films or writing stories, novels on healing? Is that something that you would consider exploring?
Absolutely. I would say probably all of my work so far, including the poetry, has been interested in restoration, in looking at different kinds of speakers and different ways of just being a person and being inside of ourselves, being with each other, and being on, you know, this planet, which is, you know, a tremendous gift to be able to experience this planet. And so just even recognizing, you know, what's momentous there is in conversation with healing for me. And definitely in my future works as well, is like thinking about writing characters that are actively grappling, are not in any way perfect, have to deal with their own sense of entitlement or arrogance, and how do they then heal themselves? How do they then feel more comfortable with who they are and who they're meant to be? Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. That was excellent. Joe, did you want to comment or?
Yeah, sure. I mean, even in this film, we see the journey that Abdou is taking from just kind of being shocked at the lack of information, and then how that motivates him to build his own the world and his own interpretation of Mansa Musa's kingdom as the palace and the palace interior. So at the end, the court, that's all made by Abdou. And so that's a healing process for Abdou in that film. And so, but also, obviously, like I said, making the film was also a healing process because it's trying to restore a more accurate narrative. And so, part of, a lot of journalism, for example, it's about telling what's going wrong in society, what's happening that's negative in society. But that's, in order to heal, you need to figure out what's really wrong. And be, tell that truth, and just say it, and locate it. So that's, yeah, but you can't just say it, locate it, and then not do anything about it. So it's definitely there, present throughout everything.
Thank you. And I've worked with a number of students who are so interested in filmmaking. And they're very much interested in filmmaking within their community, but also with an interest abroad as well. What advice can you give to our students who are interested in creating their own documentary films? And I'm specifically referring to ages 13 to 18. What type of advice can you give them? Ladan, you can go first if you want to.
I would say first, trust in your instincts and in your curiosities. Don't let anybody tell you that a story is foolish or is not interesting. Don't be so worried, because sometimes that is a lot of the message you get. Oh, nobody will be interested in this, or because you don't see examples that are similar, it doesn't mean that you're on the wrong path or that the subject matter is not interesting. It just means, well, it's up to you, to tell the story that you need in this world. And then to just start doing things. And people who are between the ages of, I think you said 13 and 18, yes, really grew up in a kind of fascinating technology rich era. So they have they are so savvy and they know how to do so much. And so I would say you don't always have to wait for, to get to college or something, or wait till you have a whole team assembled. Work with what you have, you know what I mean? Use your cell phone, use an old camera, mix different kinds of footage, put your photographs in there, watch a lot of things, see the stuff that you like. And if you want to emulate it, great. But if you want to do things in a way that you don't see any examples for visually, just try it out, see if your community will help you. If you have to start with like a sibling or one of your parents helping you, great. It's all an exploration at no matter what level you're at. And I think that that's something that we both learned is you could be just starting your exploration and experimentation, and to not be scared of that. Just dive in and see what happens.
Okay, thank you. And Joe, did you want to follow up?
Yeah. I mean, just to reiterate, you don't need to wait for validation to do it. That's something that, we had to, well, maybe I had to learn more than Ladan, but yeah, just don't have to wait for validation to do something. If you feel that the story is important and worth telling, then do it. And don't wait for somebody to be like, oh, no, you're right. Yeah, it is important. The second thing that I was thinking about is that, as young people, like, are more connected. Like, if you watch TikTok videos, those are, a lot of them are just short films, So a lot of people are already making short films. Like, there are some TikTok videos that the editing is incredible, and it's so innovative. And so I just feel like young people, like, just avoid the peer pressure of just thinking what's cool to do. Just tell the story that you like, that you can't stop thinking about, and sure. Just use what you have. Like, start small. Maybe you can start with a 1-minute video before you do a 10-minute video, or a 10-minute video before you do a 30-minute video. But yeah, you just use whatever you have, because it will always come off as authentic if you actually mean it. So the meaning of it, if you're really serious and you mean it, what you're saying, then that will show, and whatever, the production value that's secondary, you know, to what the story is you're trying to tell and what you're trying to say.
That's excellent. It's sort of like writing a short story before you write a book, you know, starting small. And I love loving what you said about not waiting for approval. Well, both of you emphasize not waiting for approval, which, you know, leads to the advice that you can give young people about following their dreams and passions. A lot of times we look for that validation and that approval, but you're saying don't wait for that. So that's excellent. And, you know, the last question I want to ask you is, why do you know, what specifically do you hope that the audience and future audiences will take away from the film?
I think Joe should go first.
Yeah, Joe, you can go first.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've said this, you know, throughout this talk, but I would just, the part of the point of this is to really direct attention into this period of time in this history and its importance, its central role to the making of the world that we live in today, and how that has been discounted and devalued for political purposes. It's not just, oh, I didn't feel like telling this story. No, this has been politically, it's been hidden for different reasons, and that there's so much source material out there that's just waiting to, that needs to be, resources need to be dedicated to that. So I would appeal to different institutions to just really invest in West African history, because it's super important for West Africa, but it's super important for the telling of the West too, how the West came to be, and telling of this country's story. And so that's really what I want to reiterate, and accounting for what happened, because, you know, the power structure, if you have the power structure, then you tell the story. So but if you're able to shift the narrative is hollow, then the power structure is also hollow. So let's build a substantial narrative, because everybody needs to be partaking in that.
And that is
everybody has a role and the responsibility in that.
Thank you. That was excellent. And Ladan, did you want to kind of follow up with that? That was excellent.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the only thing that I would add to that is, you know, one of the hopes that we had as a team, and that is, you know, what inspired me to even get involved, is just to really encourage people that you don't have to be a historian, you don't have to be a researcher, you don't have to be an artist to participate in history, to be a storyteller, and to have a sense of curiosity about all the ways that a story can move or transform, you know, either just in a document or, you know, inside of us, inside of, you know, our own hearts and our own kind of interests. And so I think one takeaway that I've really wanted is, even for this to open up different curiosities about personal histories, which then become local histories, which then become diasporic histories. And so who knows what can come of that, especially with younger viewers, is if they just kind of keep asking questions and they have you know, really cultivate a deep sense of curiosity, then it's harder to just force any like ready-made story down their throats. It's a lot harder to kind of try and enchant them with lies about the African continent and about Black people as a whole. And so, yeah, just curiosity as a form of resistance, just a kind of passion for life, and of knowing that your own stories are already important without an institution or a book or a teacher telling you that it is, to know that it already is, that it took so much for you to be here now. Everything that the people before you had to pass through, had to survive, ways that they had to innovate, ways that they had to have all of that. it can only be a wonder to look back and to also look forward into the future and to be an active maker. You know, you don't have to be passive and wait for history to fall on you. You know, you're actively making it now. And because it lives in you, because it's in your very DNA, you're also a part of, you know, what has passed before you.
That is powerful and excellent. I agree with the comment. That I really appreciate all the powerful words that Ladan has shared during the Q&A. It feels very much like a call to action, especially to our youth, and I hope our message really hits home for them. And I appreciate it. And both of you, Joe and Ladan, have given us some powerful narratives that will carry on, hopefully, after our program is over, and hopefully we can have more conversations about history, about our place in history, about specifically what you said, participating as participants in the story of history. We don't necessarily have to carry a title, right? We are history. I would always say that, you know, a museum tells millions of stories. It's for millions, not just the specific ones that you see on the wall, but it's millions of stories being told. And so I feel that the honesty that both of you have conveyed this afternoon gives us a lot to think about, not just about Mansa Musa's legacy, but also about our responsibility to preserving history and seeking it out. And given us sort of that gateway to say, you know, and of course a kind way, we all have a responsibility to sort of preserve history, seek out history, and find the story within our history. And you know, it's just wonderful to see a lot of the comments coming through. So with that, every man is a history. Thank you so much for posting that. I'd like to say thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Ladan Osman, the writer and the producer of Son of the Soil. Thank you so much. Joe Penney, the director of Son of the Soil. Thank you so very much for your time and for spending time with us, allowing us to feature your film this afternoon. You have enlightened us as educators, historians, viewers, people who are enthusiastic about history. We thank you. And I would like to thank everyone who was able to participate today and to listen to our speakers, to view the film Son of the Soil. I thank you so much. This actually concludes our program for today, and I would like to invite all of you to view our website, africasi.edu, at the Smithsonian National Museum of African Art. Until then, have a wonderful, wonderful evening, and thank you so much for joining us today for our screening and our Q&A of Son of the Soil, the story of Mansa Musa. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.